My name's Joanna Orland and I'm a senior sound designer. A senior sound designer is someone who makes sound effects and designs the sound for games. Well, for me, a senior sound designer is someone who leads the audio vision creatively on a game. Now, this vision also entails creating sound effects for the game that fit into the audio world that you're creating. So what I do is I start off by creating an audio vision, which is what the audio's goal is for the game that I'm working on. For example, when I worked on Wonderbook Book of Spells, that was a magic game, so I had to figure out what the sound of magic was. So I did a lot of research, I watched a lot of films, read some books, and I discovered a pattern in mostly the film stuff that I watched. Basically, in a lot of films and popular culture, the magic sounds are sourced from nature. So I decided for Book of Spells that was what we were going to do as well. So I created this whole audio vision that the sound of magic would be sourced from nature. And then as a sound designer, I had to then create these sounds that fit into this world that was being sourced from nature. I think we do look to film quite a bit as an example of how our audio should sound, because the mainstream is pop culture and film is a popular media. But that's what people are used to. These conventions that we hear are defined by the films that we watch. So with games, we don't want to do something so unfamiliar to people. We want them to believe in our vision. So a lot of the time we will use familiar tropes and sounds and methods that film may use. And that's because, you know what, it's effective, it's proven, it works. So we're not reinventing the wheel with games. I think great sound design comes from having that vision. I think if you're just creating sound effects from a list or just to an object in the game, it doesn't create that audio world. But what makes it great is having that vision and something cohesive with a strong identity. There are so many games with great audio, it's really hard to choose just one. I'm a huge fan of The Last of Us as a game and their sound design. I think it's brilliant how these characters are brought to life, and there are really good acting performances as well, and you would definitely say that's filmic quality. I'm a huge fan of Red Dead Redemption. I think the sound in that is brilliant. The ambiences in particular are just beautiful, and it's one of those games you could just ride a horse to the desert and have this amazing audio experience without anything else going on. And I love it. I think it's great. I think with game sound designers, we are always a little bit hung up on technology. Whereas, you know, in film, you don't have to worry about how you're going to get that to sound in the film because you just make it to picture and it's done. Whereas with game, it's an interactive medium, so you need to worry about implementation and you have to make sure your game sounds good no matter what the player is doing. So that's a huge challenge to kind of consider whatever the player could do at any point in time. You have to make it sound good for whatever they're doing. Okay, I'm going to show my age here. Well, I've been working in game audio for a decade or so now, and it has obviously come along quite a way. We've changed consoles, we've advanced, and you know the biggest thing is we now have more space for our audio on the console, so we can now do these Hollywood things we've always strived to do, and it's a lot easier for us to do it because we don't have to worry as much about compression and fitting in all the assets into a small amount of space. So I believe audio has a huge emotional impact on the player when they're playing a game. I believe that audio plays a huge role in the emotional effect of the player in a game. You know, audio is what's manipulating them emotionally. We can use almost psychological tricks to ensure that they're feeling something without them even noticing, because when audio is done well, no one notices it. It's only when it's done wrong or poorly that people take notice. With audio, if your audio is well thought through, you can use emotional tricks. So for example, with the horror genre, there's quite an obvious pattern that film does with the soundscapes. The environments are always very abstract and hyper-real, which is an exaggerated form of reality. And the character sounds are always very naturalistic and realistic. And I believe it's a psychological trick because the player, if it's a horror game, or the viewer, if it's a horror film, can feel an emotional attachment to the character because they recognize the sounds as human and as fragile almost, because it's very naturalistic and almost frail in their human elements. But then when this character is placed in this really hyper-real environment, there's a tension that's created because this character that they believe in, because they've got an attachment to them, is put somewhere very unfamiliar, which is scary and unnerving, because this environment sounds really alien and they don't know what could happen to this character which they've got this emotional bond with. To make a sound, there's no one way. So it's a combination of using existing material that comes from libraries and also going out and recording your own source material. And then I might sometimes take something out of a library, tweak it a bit and use it, but most of the time it's taking lots of different elements from different sources and putting them together in a new way to create a new sound. There are many challenges when teaching sound design, because if someone doesn't already have that background in sound design, a lot of the time they don't even know what it is, and they certainly don't know what it entails. So I think the first obstacle to overcome is just getting people to understand what it is a sound designer does for a living. Again, sound, if done well, goes completely unnoticed. So you have to kind of get them to notice the sound that's doing its job and not being noticed. So yeah, some of the challenges are just getting people up to speed, getting them to understand the possibilities of sound. A lot of the time, picture is prominent in the medium that you're focused on, and yeah, people forget the importance of sound. Yeah, I think people don't respect sound as an art form that much because, yeah, you don't notice it when it's good. You only notice it when it's bad. So when people think of sound, they might think of some of the bad examples, which is a shame, because the good examples, sound makes you feel rather than hear, and that's what it should do. It's going to be a terrible answer because it was a fluke. I got my start in game audio in a very unconventional way because I never set out to work in game audio. I knew I wanted to work in sound, but no one told me game audio is a possibility. And part of it's probably because I am a woman, I am female, and part of it is because at the time it wasn't as mainstream, it wasn't as acceptable to go into game audio. Everyone wanted to go into radio or music or film sound. Games, they weren't even an option. I had done some studying in sound. I did my undergraduate degree in radio and television arts with a major in audio. Then I did some interactive studies as well. That was in Toronto. And then I moved to London to do an MA in audio production. And that's when I really started focusing on sound design. And after graduating, I was ready to become a sound designer. And I saw an advertisement for the position of a junior sound designer to work for the company that made Burnout. And at the time, Burnout was the only game I was playing. I was quite obsessed with it. So for me to see junior sound designer position plus Burnout, I went for it, and luckily I got it because it was almost fate. Yeah. It was funny because I was so excited to work on Burnout, and then when I was put on Black, which was the first-person shooter, I was initially disappointed, which is hilarious in retrospect because it was an awesome game. I learned so much. And, I wouldn't have had that opportunity on Burnout in the same way. So for me, I'm really lucky I didn't end up working on Burnout right away. I ended up getting this completely different experience that I wasn't really prepared for, but I was thrown in the deep end and I came out swimming. Yeah, I guess I'm still really proud of Black, even though it was many, many years ago and it was the first game I worked on. I think I'm most proud of it because I learned the most because it was my first game, my first chance working with game audio. Again, I didn't even think game audio could be a career option for me, and when I actually got to work on it hands-on, it was just this revelation. So for me, I'm still really proud of Black because it kind of formed the basis of everything that I've done since. For me, being a sound designer, it's all about the creativity. And because I'm in game audio, technology is obviously a huge part of it. But I strongly believe that technology should be a means to an end in what we do. Technology should support the creative vision and not the other way around. Unless, you're making a simulator or a tech demo, it's the creative vision that we want to explore and we want to develop. So I I think people shouldn't get so hung up on the technology and just use it as a means to an end.